The problem I received was how much time people spent grooming, which was my response variable, by gender, which is my factor variable per week. So first, I analyzed the normality of the data, and the null hypothesis states that the data is from a normal distribution, whereas the alternative hypothesis tells us that the data is not from a normal distribution. So based on the goodness of fit test using JUMP, the p-values for each test were 0.01, which results in us rejecting the null hypothesis because it tells us that the male and female data are not normal, and in fact that they're skewed right, as you can see here. Means and standard deviation. So for males, the mean was 33.86 and the standard deviation was 30.21, whereas for females, their mean was 49.72 and their standard deviation was 37.36. Next, we test for unequal variances using the Levene test. So the null hypothesis states that the variance for male data equals the variance for female data, and the alternative hypothesis states that the variance for male data does not equal female data. So using the Levene test, it tells us that the p-value is less than 0.0001, which leads us to reject the null. You can conclude that there's unequal variances, meaning that the time spent grooming for male and female standard deviations are different. Lastly, we move on to the hypothesis or mean testing and confidence interval. So we use the t-test because we assume unequal differences from the previous Levene test. And the null hypothesis states that the average time a male spends grooming minus the average time a female spends grooming equals 0. And the alternative hypothesis states that the average time a male spends grooming minus the average time a female spends grooming does not equal 0. Which leads us to use the two-sided test. So our t ratio, or our test statistic, is negative 54.9475, and our p-value is less than 0.0001. And to reverse this test statistic, you would multiply this by -1. This tells us that we can reject the null and conclude that the average time a male spent grooming is different than the average time a female spent grooming. Because our confidence interval is negative 16.425 to negative 15.294, which is under 0 or negative, the order of differences tells us that the average time spent grooming for males is less than the average time spent grooming for females.